This is my heater. I dare you to hit it.
He'll be sorry.
Want the heater? I'll give it to you.
Basketball, maybe they don't hit it.
A swing and a drive to deep right.
Clear the deck. Cannonball coming.
Left field. It is out of here.
What up? What's good? Baseball Unstitched. We are back, and boy, do we have something cooking for you guys today. Brad Lidge on the podcast. What a excellent human being. We are so appreciative of the time that he took with us and excited to share that interview with you guys. Of course, first and foremost, this week in baseball. But, Flax, the question of every episode, how was the weekend?
Weekend was good. I got to go play golf again at a pretty cool place. Thanks again to my mother-in-law, who is on an absolute heater. Thanks again to my mother-in-law for helping us get Brad Lidge on the podcast. Again, on an absolute heater. Julie, thank you. We might have you just sending out emails to anybody and everybody sooner rather than later at this rate. No, weekend was good. We won our semifinal game. Some might call it our championship series game to get to the championship or the Men's League World Series in 2 weeks. Ryan pitched his butt off, 7 innings, 1 run. 8 or 9 strikeouts at some rate. He got outs. That's what matters, right?
I did.
But no, weekend was good. Weekend was good overall.
Yeah, not bad at all. Felt pretty good on the hill. It was nice to go out and be effective for the boys more than anything else. Baseball was good. A lot happened this week in baseball. Flax is here to break it down, and we're starting off with a tough one here. Flax saying a name that many of you just simply refer to this gentleman as the password, so I'll throw it to him.
Yeah, we'll start with MLB debuts this week. Jostinson Garcia, if you didn't know, that's how you say his name. I have it written phonetically on the outline this week so that I didn't screw that up. Carson Williams with the Rays made his debut, hit a bomb on his debut night. Parker Messick also made his debut. Maximo Acosta for the Marlins. Bubba Chandler came out of the bullpen for 3 innings. Stuff was electric for the Pirates. They absolutely have one there. And then Zachary Big Sugar Maxwell came into the game out of the pen for the Reds. And as Jackson put it, if his walk-up at some point does not turn into pour some sugar on me, we riot. So those were some of the bigger ones this week.
And before you move on, Parker Messick, Cleveland Guardians starting pitcher.
Thank you, yes. And he was good. He was very good. Stuff is really, really, really solid. But this is that great time of year. Rosters are about to expand. We're going to see even more debuts. This is the time where it starts to tick up, especially for teams that are not in the hunt. You start to see some moves where other guys get DFA'd, then picked up by other teams. Shout out Nate Lowe. Jacob Wilson came back off the IL this week. Had a really solid weekend in Seattle. I think he was something like 4 for 9 or 4 for 10. Scored a couple of runs, hit a home run, hit a couple of doubles. Jacob Wilson doing Jacob Wilson things. We said this before. We talked about this with his dad, Jack Wilson. For those who think that he is just a singles hitter, 23-year-old power is not the same as 26-year-old power. The fact that at 23, that Gumby-looking man is hitting 11 bombs with time missed means he could potentially be a 20 home run guy by the middle of his prime. I love that for the Athletics at the shortstop position. Tigers, Cubs, Royals playing very good baseball right now. It's fun to see the Royals be there because they're pushing for an AL wildcard spot. Tigers needed this. They were not playing their best baseball 3 weeks ago. Jack Flaherty started to pick it back up. Casey Mize is still throwing well. Tarek Skubal is going tonight that we're recording, which is Monday night, against the Athletics. They're starting to just play better, and the Cubs are starting to hit. You know, this is what we always talk about with hitters that are in slumps or hitters that are not hitting well. Patience, patience, patience. Kyle Tucker needed a breather. It wasn't going well for him, and hitters tend to just continue to get more and more aggressive when that situation comes upon them. Giving him a couple of days where he is forced to be patient means that he turns back into that patient hitter in the box. What did he do? Went yard back-to-back days, his first 2 days back in the lineup. I expect him to keep hitting well and to kind of propel that team through the end of the season, if nothing else to take the number one wild card spot, but to push up against the Brewers and really try and make a run still at that division, because I don't think it's completely out of striking distance. Dodgers-Padres this past weekend. Padres took 2 of 3. Padres have been playing better than the Dodgers as of late. Now tied at the top of the NL West division, but the Dodgers have the season series 9-4 locked up, effectively have a 1-game lead in the division on a tiebreaker. Some sad news. Braves longtime scout and baseball executive Roy Clark passed away. Condolences to Clark's family, the Braves community, the Braves front office. Obviously a tough season for them, but to have this news piled on top of it is never easy. On a brighter note, Cal Raleigh sets a new single-season record for home runs by a catcher, now at 49, beating out Salvador Perez's 2021 mark of 48. I don't think it's crazy to say we could look at a new record being somewhere between 55 and 60, the way that Cal's been putting the ball out of the yard with an entire month to play. Again, that would be a big month of September, especially in Seattle when the weather starts to get a little colder. But if you saw some of the bombs he hit the other day, you could hit those through a snowstorm and they'd still get out. So I'm not worried about him. On the flip side, Anthony Volpe, I do worry about him. Aaron Boone's going to give him a couple of days off. We will see if that helps his recent struggles. It seems right now that it's more mental than physical than anything, just based on some of the mistakes he's making, the at-bats he's taking. Again, we saw this was with Brenton Doyle earlier in the year. Sometimes when guys get mentally overwhelmed, giving them a couple of days where they can reset, come to the ballpark, go through their process, knowing their role, which is, I'm going to come watch baseball today, it allows them to just kind of get a little bit of a refresh and a reset. I expect Anthony Volpe to come back from this better than he's been in a very long time. Shane Bieber, finally back after a very, very long time off. Ryan, I know this was a big one for you. Biebs went 6 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 9 Ks, no walks. Like I always say, in the zone, forcing guys to get themselves out. He did a great job of that. Really good to see him doing that for the Blue Jays. That's the type of stuff that team needs to have to propel themselves through the playoffs.
And absolutely electric documentary style like comeback video from Shane Bieber and team. If you haven't had the opportunity, go take a look at probably all of his socials. What an awesome
Can I say this? Posting that pre-outing is a ballsy move. Like 6.5 minutes is a long comeback video. Now, if you post it after you go and dominate somebody like he did, cinema. Absolute cinema. But doing it before, that's a whole heck of a lot of pressure.
Man, gotta have a little bit of delusion, baby.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was either going to be perfect or it was going to go down in a blaze of glory. And I'm glad that it ended up being perfect for him. Bronx Bombers went for 9 in their secondary home ballpark, George M. Steinbrenner Field, Yankee Stadium South, as some are calling it, some being me. And then the last thing this week, the announcement of the on-paper deal that is between the MLB, inclusive of ESPN, or as some more proper publications put it, Disney's ESPN, Comcast's NBC, and Netflix. ESPN is licensing MLB.TV content for all out-of-market games and for 5 different in-market games, which would be the Guardians, the Padres, the Twins, the D-backs, and the Rockies. All 5 teams got caught up in the mix of some different regional broadcast issues, and a bunch of them have actually been part of like a Major League Baseball regional providing package this past year. So not shocked that those are those teams. Interested to see how ESPN chooses to deliver it. It could either be really great for ESPN Plus subscribers, or it could be totally new. Who knows? Netflix is getting the Home Run Derby, and then recently announced the 2026 World Baseball Classic, which I don't care who you are, that is good news. Netflix is a really easy platform to watch on any device. Something for the World Baseball Classic where it's not going to be muddied with tons of what I expect to be on some other platforms, a really tough viewing experience. Netflix has showed that for live events, they tend to get a lot into the nitty gritty of the experience, which I think will be really interesting for things like the World Baseball Classic and the Home Run Derby. And then NBC's getting Sunday Night Baseball and the wild card games. I don't know what that means for the World Series, the division games, and the championship games, but we will see. I'm assuming maybe Fox still has contracts there. I haven't looked into it, but I would imagine Fox still has some contracts there. Turner Broadcast probably has some contracts there because I know TBS has owned a lot of those games for a while. But yeah, that's where we're at with This Week in Baseball. A lot happened this week in baseball.
And there's never anything wrong with a lot because, ladies and gentlemen, it right now as of recording is August 25th. Start soaking it in. We are winding down baseball. Nah, you're right. You're
got
right.
2 full months.
It's not October
got 2 full
yet.
months.
Either way, big thing for you guys to note too with the MLB TV deal before we move on is there's just simply a lot that is not fully known. What we laid out to you is the stuff that is the surface level and we know is happening in some way, shape, or form. There will be more coming out on that as we go. If you remember our episode last week, we did happen to talk about realignment, and what we didn't realize is Rob Manfred's comment about ESPN and alignment being important. Turns out this had a lot to do with that statement more than likely. So reading between the lines is something that we potentially all can do a little bit better of a job on.
And if you grew up when we did, reading Between the Lions, a fun kids show. So there's that.
That was not a cameo I was expecting today.
The only, my wife's going to love that one. The only other thing I will say is happy birthday to the Max Muncies as of Monday, August 25th. That is today. One, I believe, just turned 23, and the other one turned 33, 35. I don't know how old the older Max Muncy is. Definitely older.
He's having a good enough season that age doesn't matter for him right now.
Well, it's crazy because, with the age, the man just found out he needed glasses, and then he just started dominating. So shout out to Ethan at Ops Baseball for putting together where he stats-wise once he got glasses. Very high amongst everyone in baseball. Unfortunate for the lost portion of the beginning of the season.
And as well as Max Muncy is hitting with glasses, the one thing I can guarantee is the season is not going nearly as well as 2008 did for our guest today on the podcast, Brad Lidge himself. We'd love to talk more baseball with you guys, but we've got a feeling that listening to Brad Lidge talk baseball is probably a higher priority on your list. And without further ado, we're going to make sure that gets checked off your list today. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Lidge. As always, we're excited, but we're definitely excited for this one. We are so happy to have a former two-time MLB All-Star and 2008 World Series champion, Brad Lidge, on the podcast today. Brad, welcome aboard. Thank you for taking some time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Thank you. And, we know a lot about your baseball career and how great you were, but we wanted to start somewhere else, honestly. And we found out recently that you have a huge passion for archaeology. And we learned a little bit about this passion through a different interview we watched. But we'd love to hear a little bit of an update on that pursuit of a PhD and potentially more digs that you've done out in Italy and other places.
Yeah, right. So that has been definitely a very different path after baseball. And to be totally honest, even when I was playing baseball toward the end of my career, I kind of I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I retired. I, might spend some time in baseball, but I also had this kind of, I don't want to say it was a burgeoning interest. It was something I always loved since I was in high school, and that's world history. And so I finished my bachelor's degree toward the end of my career. I'd started at Notre Dame and completed about 3 years, and I was a business major. So I kind of had to redo everything and go back and get my undergraduate as a religious studies major. And I really didn't want to just read about it. So I finished that degree, and I was like, I love history. I love learning about it, but there's got to be something more proactive than just sitting down and reading. So archaeology seemed like a perfect fit. And, I got so then I kind of went into a master's degree program after that from about 2014 to 2017 and got my master's degree in ancient Mediterranean archaeology. And, I was really fortunate. My family was very flexible. My wife's like 2013, first year I had my summer to myself, to our family. And she was like, if you really want to do this and you need to go do an excavation for this, like I'm happy to take the kids. Let's go somewhere and see what happens. So we went to Italy for about 5 weeks and did my first excavation out there. And it was fantastic. Italians love kids. My kids were small at that point. So we were like, you know what, this could work every summer, and literally every summer except for 2. Since then, I've been in Italy excavating, and I now actually go during the winters as well. I've kind of do a couple different projects out there. I finished the master's degree in 2017, and since then I've been kicking around the idea of a PhD. But I finally found a project and a university to work with. A little bit tricky because a PhD, has a lot of different requirements, and you got to find the right advisors and everything else. So fortunately, I've been able to do that, and I'll be, I think, starting in 2026. I'm actually publishing something right now that is going to kind of be the first part of what I'm doing, and then hopefully enter into it essentially in 2026.
So I have a comment and then I have a question. My comment would be, it's very athlete of you to say, I like reading, but I need to do something hands-on. Like whether we're talking about a baseball player, or we're talking about any other athlete, that's how both Ryan and I were in school. It was like, this is great. Can you teach me in like a hands-on way where I can do this and see this and understand it? My question to you, when you've been out doing these digs, have you run into any people that you've had the pleasure of like reading research from, or anything that you've gone and done where you've kind of connected dots from stuff that you got to sit down and read for a while? Or has it been a brand new experience holistically?
I mean, there was kind of a lot of brand new experiences, I'll be honest. And, everything from working with different universities and their, when I was first starting with volunteers and students from those universities looking at me and scratching their head and saying, are you the same? Like, what are you doing here? Like, what happened? So there was everything from that, so just kind of working with a younger student population for the first couple of years, and then becoming a part of the staff at a couple different excavations. And now I supervise kind of depending on the year, several different areas and trenches and stuff in the excavation site that we do. But I think there are, I would say this, initially everything was brand new. Initially I was just like, this is a crazy world. What am I doing? I don't belong here. But I really did love it, and I had a passion for it. And I just kept doing it. And eventually things kind of, fit together. And then, after you do it for a little while and you're on, the staff for a little while, you kind of start to harken back a little bit to, when I was like a veteran player and, being a closer in a bullpen and having young guys and kind of being the leader out there for that bullpen. And then, those skills translate maybe a little bit into, some of these student volunteers that we have. Right. And I actually, the summer project I do is with UMass Amherst. And so I work with that university, and I also do stuff with the University of Penn. I'm on the board of their museum there. And so we, just kind of all these different paths cross in weird, odd ways. But you do find certain things kind of where there are some familiar feels, I guess you would say, with baseball. But mostly everything for the first 5-6 years was like, it was all brand new. And just all the work I was doing, the sites, what I was learning about, learning Italian, just whatever it was. I mean, it's all pretty much brand new.
That's awesome.
How much Italian do you speak at this point?
Parlo un poco Italiano. I think I'm conversationally literate, but I don't know. Maybe I'm like an Italian 3 student somewhere in there. I think when you've been there enough times, you're able to find your way around, and I think my Italian skills are not where I'd like them to be. I'm not fluent, but I think everyone has a different definition of what fluent is. And I would say I can get what I need in Italian, and I work with Italian teams, and we can talk about excavations and archaeology and history in Italian. And so, I know enough, but everyone always would like to be better, I think, at a foreign language.
You being a high-tier athlete, hearing that from you is the least surprising thing that I think will happen to me today. Your drive to be better or the best at anything. So I do know something you are fluent in, and that's baseball. That's for sure. We have a few months ago had the opportunity to interview Jack Wilson, another former All-Star and very good MLB player. One of the things he talked to us about was the seasons that maybe others deem your best seasons, or the seasons that they recognize, aren't actually always the seasons you as a player remember as your best season. 2008 was so memorable for all of us. And listen, as a Nationals fan, I watched you cut us down every time you had the opportunity to in 2008. But are there some other seasons where you really feel like they were a bigger impact to your career from an overall standpoint?
I think first I would say yes. 2008 was, in terms of my job as a closer, that was my best season. Obviously, my job is to save the game and to not blow it. And that year just, happened to be as good as it could get. But, frankly, because I had such a great defense behind me and such a great team to be a part of. And there was a lot that goes into a season like that. No one is able to do that on their own. So those were great surroundings. So in terms of being a closer, probably 2008. But in terms of being probably pitching the best I ever did, I think 2004 in Houston was probably my best season. And I say that for a couple reasons. I think number one, that was the year I became a closer for the Houston Astros. For me, I had this dream when I knew that I wasn't going to be a starter in the major leagues, that I was going to be in the bullpen. I had this dream of being a closer, and I had Billy Wagner, my mentor, to kind of look and see how he went about his program. And by the way, just got back from Cooperstown only a couple weeks ago, where I got to spend some time, rekindling some memories with him and my former Astros teammates out there. But, when I watched Billy Wagner go about his program, I was like, that's the dude I want to emulate my game after. I want to be a great closer like he is. But you never even know if you're going to get a chance to be a closer. And that was like, young in my career. And then 2002, I get called up because, you spend time with these guys in spring training. Even if you're not on the big league team, you still get to, pick their brains in spring training, being in Major League spring training. So 2002, I get called up, and that's when I really knew I was going to be a bullpen guy. In 2003, just tried to do everything I could to be a great setup guy for Octavio Dotel in the 8th inning. And then he set up for Billy Wagner in the 9th. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. We've got this great bullpen. But then all of a sudden, we trade Billy Wagner after 2003. And so that makes Dotel the closer, and then I'm his setup guy. But if you're Octavio Dotel, who was an awesome pitcher, and by the way, the late, great Octavio Dotel, unfortunately, we passed away this not too long ago in that incident, Dominican. But, if you're Octavio Dotel, those are some big shoes to fill when Billy Wagner leaves. And I thought he did a decent job as a closer, but I think, the fans in Houston kind of in general was used to this domination. And so I had a really strong start to the season, and it was like, okay, I was hearing these rumors that we might be trading Dotel, and this trade kind of went together where we were able to land Carlos Beltran as a young star player, and we had to trade Dotel to do it. So that jumped me right into the closer role. And I will say that, a couple things here, like the amount of adrenaline I had when I first went out there was like, it was almost too much. It was like one of those deals where you could easily airmail like the first 10 fastballs because it's just so much. But, I kind of learned how to breathe into the role, which is one of the things that Billy Wagner was talking to me about. He's like, you're going to have more adrenaline than you've ever had if you're a closer. But if you don't learn how to control it, it's not going to matter. Once you do learn how to control it, then you're probably going to be as well off as you've ever been, because it's going to add a little bit to how you feel out there. Your velocity will click up a tick. So that was something I was proud of, to be able to kind of control that adrenaline and go on a great run. And then in 2004, we won our first ever postseason series in the history of the Houston Astros, which is just bizarre to even think about. Yeah. And we had some, of course, that was the year Clemens and Pettit came over, and we had this incredible team, Jeff Kent, all these, superstar kind of Hall of Fame caliber guys. And really for me, when I look back in that season, what I was most proud of is the amount of innings and games I pitched in the regular season and then in the postseason as well. And I will say that my arm never quite felt as good as that year when that season kind of came and went. I still felt good afterward and everything else, but that year really for me, I had all that adrenaline. So every time I went out there, I remember veteran guys in our bullpen, guys like Russ Springer and Dan Maselli, they were like, you need to tell them that you can't throw every single day because it's going to like not be good for you in a couple years from now. And I was like, I feel great, whatever. So, I was really proud to be able to take the ball just about, every game, and especially in September. I mean, once you get to September as a bullpen guy, things are very different now. But then it was like you would never dream of saying I need a night off. Like you could throw 4 or 5 days in a row. You continue to pitch. That's just what you do. So, so it was, I was proud to be able to do that. And so that's one of the things I look back at 2004 and say, maybe that was my best season because of how often I was able to take the ball and how many games and innings I pitched in that year.
I love that. A very parallel scenario, I guess, around 10 years later that I think about is when Mariano Rivera retired. And you look at David Robertson and you look at the situation he was in for so long, basically setting up or being in those late innings when Mariano Rivera was still at his dominance. And then all of a sudden he's stepping in, and he did a great job, right? I mean, it's a guy had 39 saves in his last year in New York, but that was never his role. And the ability to step into that role when you've never done it, even when you've been successful in the league, pitching in different spots, I think is so difficult to do. And I think it is really impressive. But it's so fascinating the way you talk about, like, especially at that age, like you just take the ball. It's such a it feels very manufactured nowadays in terms of who throws when, why they throw. It's everything is thought out. Everything is a process. Before you even step on a big league mound, they know how you're most likely going to get used, when you'll get used, how often. And it's like managing an investment more than it's managing a ball game or it's managing a season and trying to win games. Is it hard for you to watch baseball now in some ways, the way that it happens and the way the back of bullpens are treated in either the way of like, man, maybe I would have lasted longer had I been in that situation, or just like, man, I wish these guys would just go get the ball and throw?
Yeah. So I guess the short answer is it is sometimes frustrating to think about, the amount of times where I knew that I was like, my arm was not okay, but, I was definitely going to say that I can pitch versus the freedom for relievers now to say, hey, I don't feel 100% today. I need a day off. That was one of those things that just was unheard of, kind of as you were laying out right there. And, for me, like we had our pitching coach would come up and, the bullpen would be together and he'd say, kind of go up to each one of us as we're all right there trying to be accountable to each other and say, like, do any of you guys really need a day off today? And we're looking around at each other like, oh, no, I can go. When you have, when you're in front of a group of guys that you're trying to do everything you can to support, you're never going to say that you can't throw in that situation. But nowadays, pitching coaches, everyone's much more intelligent now. People go up to individually and just kind of say, hey, do you need a day? Like, and it's okay if you do. And I think that that's great. Like I said, it's a little bit frustrating that luxury wasn't there when I was throwing, but many pitchers before I threw would say, hey, I was, somebody that went out there. Goose Gossage says it all the time. I threw 2 or 3 innings every time, and that was just the way it was. Yeah. And so, there's an evolution in the game, and this is, where we are now is, I think it's interesting because it's also a double-edged sword. Like guys are absolutely more aware of things that cause injuries, but because there's more days off and because the pitch counts are more limited and because everything is so manufactured, as you said, what you end up getting, and same thing with starters, you end up getting this mindset that, wow, I'm out here for a limited time. I've got I'm pitching today and not tomorrow. So the 15, 20 pitches I have, I'm going 110%. Yep. And what ends up happening is guys end up hurting themselves because they don't pace themselves, like especially starters. I've got 5 innings. This is a sprint, not a marathon anymore. And so I'm going to airmail everything I have. And it ends up leading to more injuries because no one really has that mindset of like, go out there and kind of, you can maybe get out of this inning at 90%. And then if you're throwing 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row, you'll be okay on that 4th or 5th day. But that's just, it's just an observation. And I think it has led to more injuries, unfortunately. But again, it's an evolution of the game. Every 10 years or so, I think is a little bit different. And certainly when I was leaving the game, it was still kind of a badge of honor to be somebody that could throw a lot of innings in a lot of games and not really say anything. But in that, it's 2025, so now it's been 12 years. And I think that I'm definitely noticing the intelligent craft of not blowing yourself out and not pitching every single day.
I saw the other night. It was an Orioles game, and one of the Orioles pitchers, a younger guy, came into a bases loaded situation, strikes out 3 guys, gets out of the inning. And the question was asked to the manager after the game, you have a shortened bullpen. Why didn't he go out for another inning? And the response was, after the energy that you come out of the game with, I didn't know if sending him back out was going to lead to basically everything falling apart. Like, I wanted him coming off the mound with good feelings for his next outing. And I think there's 2 sides to that. When you're trying to let younger guys grow and you're not in a situation where you're fighting for a playoff spot, it is kind of about building confidence. But there is a level at which, if you think that guy is going to be a future piece for you in any way, shape, or form, learning how to manage emotions and learning how to manage energy to go back out and throw a second inning, if your arm can handle throwing a second inning, I think could be an even better growing experience, right? You have to earn you have to earn the confidence. This is another opportunity to earn the confidence on the mound.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said. And I think what happens is in maybe even more simplistic terms, guys need to learn how to pitch. Like, you need to learn how to pitch, and you don't always get to go out there at 100%. When you are 100% and you're feeling 100%, you don't necessarily have to hit every spot. Your stuff is going to be great on those days. And so you really won't refine your craft. I've listened to a lot of guys that I grew up with, starters, and even before me, some of the old school guys are always, frustrated that these younger guys don't ever learn how to pitch. And I think what they're trying to say is, guys go out there and it is a sprint, but you never, if you're always being pulled after 5 innings, well, when the tank is a little bit emptied in that 6th, 7th inning, that's when you really learn what you're doing. I'm 90% now. I started the game throwing 95 and now I'm throwing 92. How do I get guys out now? Well, you've got to locate, you've got to change speeds, you've got to try and get some kind of movement. And so that's really learning the craft of pitching. And guys are not forced to learn that as much anymore because of the amount of rest that they have and because of the starter, the lack of innings, lack of going deep into a game, or reliever, the lack of throwing however many days in a row where you are 90% on that 4th day, and you've got to figure out, today I don't have it, so I've got to figure out how to get guys out without my best stuff. And I do think there really is something to that that's unfortunate, that's been lost a little bit. And in this day, and I'll be old school, but everything is measured with spin rates and everything else, and guys get this in their mind. I would say in the minor leagues, but even college and high school. And it's like, these things are being measured now. And right from a young age, they're thinking about how I can create the most of that, how I can be 110% of myself. Because if I'm in high school and, whether I get guys out or not, if I can generate high velocity, there's going to be a college that wants me to pitch. And if I'm in college, whether I get guys out or not, if I can generate a high spin rate, then I'm going to get drafted. And if I'm in the minor leagues, even if I'm walking tons of dudes, if my numbers show whatever they show, I'm going to get an opportunity in the major league. So they never think about pitching the way that they used to, and it's a detriment to the game. But it is the nature of the game now, and here we are. But it's also kind of fun to watch guys throwing 105 here and there, so that's not a bad thing.
I really love that thought process of the conversation, because one of the things, and when we started this podcast, that was important to us was, we feel there's a large gap between what we would consider old school baseball group and the analytical group, right? There's a misunderstanding of how to utilize all of these different numbers that are going in. There's a group of people who feel like everything is based around the numbers, and if we get these analytical numbers right, awesome, that's going to get us there. And then there's another camp that says, use these 2 peepers because we've used them for 200 years, and the peepers have been right most of the time. I think this actually leads us great into something that we were hoping we'd get to talk to you about, and we'll talk more about spin rates and different things of that nature. But your mentor, you've already mentioned it. He might be your mentor, but we did find out that you taught him something in Billy Wagner. And Billy Wagner doesn't credit Randy Johnson for his slider. He credits Brad Lidge for his slider. And the story's pretty cool because it's something that we used to see in the backyard, but I don't think see this at the major league level anymore, which is, he basically stated in spring training, he didn't know what to do. And he goes, hey, Brad, show me how you throw your slider. And then that was apparently history. So we'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so that is kind of interesting, and I'm to this day I still kind of scratch my head and wonder why he came up to me and asked. But I think I was kind of known coming through our minor league system with the Houston Astros as someone who had a really good fastball, but the slider was my out pitch. And I was actually lucky to even have a slider or to even learn it, because when I was in college, I threw a curveball. I never even tampered with a slider or anything. I threw a curveball, but I kept getting hurt in the minor leagues after it was spot on, like 20 innings, elbow problems, 20 innings, elbow problems. And it just kept happening. I got, surgery and everything else. And our minor league pitching coordinator, an awesome baseball mind named Dewey Robinson, who became a pitching coach with the Astros for a little while. He was like, look, we drafted you in the first round, but you're never out there pitching. We've got to figure something out. So he changed my arm angle a little bit. And he said, let's scrap the curveball. Here is a slider grip I want you to toy with and see what happens. And I remember gripping it. And he's like, all right, I want you to kind of, go your rotation like this. I want the finger pressure like this. And it really only took about 2 or 3 bullpen sessions to where I was like, oh my gosh, this is the pitch for me. Like, and I was asking hitters to step in when I was throwing bullpens. And I'm like, tell me what you're seeing. And they were like, it's weird. Normally on a slider, I see a dot on the baseball as it's coming toward me, and that's how I pick up slider spin as a hitter. But when you're throwing it, there is no dot. And I was like, well, that's weird, because there's a dot on my side of the baseball that I can see. And just for whatever reason, the way I learned to throw it, the dot was on the wrong side of the baseball, which is actually, for me, the right side of the baseball, because it was a beneficial thing. So hitters were not seeing it. So it had this, it kind of came in and it looked almost like backspin or topspin, which are kind of hard to differentiate. And so hitters were just swinging right through it, and it would just kind of drop below the zone. And so I was very fortunate to learn that from Dewey Robinson. But because of that, my strikeout numbers piled up pretty big in the minor leagues. And then even in spring training with the big leagues, I think Wagner was watching me throw it and watching guys take swings that, looked like they didn't see it. And so he was like, all right, show me what you're doing here. And it wasn't like out of nowhere. I mean, there was, we had talked about it a little bit and talked about sliders and everything else. And, finally, I think it came to a point, maybe it was even in 2002, the year I got called up, where he was like, all right, the whole year I've been struggling with this pitch. Like, show me what you're doing. So I showed him the grip. We played catch with it for a couple days until I kind of was able to relay, like, hey, you don't want to get underneath it. Everyone says throw it like a football. Don't do that. Like, stay on top of it. Get your fingers on top and try and drive the ball down, which is a kind of a weird way to throw a pitch. But when you do that and you're able to really, stay on top of it, it'll end up getting more, top to bottom break versus lateral. And so he did that, and all of a sudden his slider, clicked up a few miles an hour, and he was getting more depth on the break. And it really, I mean, when you're throwing 103 from that, he's not super tall. He's kind of got an upshoot fastball. And when your hitters are already, trying to time that, now all of a sudden he's throwing a slider. They were swinging and missing badly. And it was fun to watch. And it's, every pitcher kind of has that evolutionary part of his career. Well, I think for him, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to throw 103 every pitch. I have a slider and I can kind of toy around with hitters now. And I think that made him very happy. So I was happy to contribute to that.
But it's so interesting, right? Because the hardest thing for a closer, and we see this even in today's game, is the sustainability of that role, right?
Yeah.
Especially today where guys have an insane amount of information. It's really, I mean, look at even Mason Miller. Mason Miller's first year, unhittable fastball. Because when's the last time a guy was pumping 103 past you continuously? And then all of a sudden he starts to develop an even better slider, and the fastball plays up even more. Well, now that he goes back and relies on the fastball a little bit more, guys just wait for it, and guys are hitting it a little bit harder. The sustainability is so hard, and so for you to have sustainability because you had such a differentiated out pitch, and then for him to have sustainability because he went from basically chucking it by guys with a little bit of mix to all of a sudden he's got this unhittable mix, that's, I think, what propels a guy like that to a Hall of Fame career when it is all said and done, because you can break up his career into big chunks of, I did it this way for so long, and even if guys want to learn that that's how I pitch, it's not how I pitch anymore. I'm going to do it this way now. And you see a lot of starters that have gone forever that, you look at Justin Verlander, you look at Max Scherzer, those guys come out, Greg Maddux did it, right? Like you can chunk out their careers into ways that they pitched hitters because they had to make adjustments. That's the name of the game. And so for him to come to you because you had something so unique, I think is so cool. But it's when people look at these different teams and they're like, oh, they've got such a good pitching lab, right? You look at Seattle, you look at the Mets, you look at some of these teams like, oh, they have such great pitching labs. What are they doing differently? It's what you just described there with the pitching coordinator. They take a guy who can spin the baseball because they know that that part of analytics matters and can translate. And then they have a guy who can understand that, but then come to you and say, we're just going to break it down into plain old pitching. And this is what I want you to change. And I don't want you to look at a monitor. I don't want you to worry about what spin rates you're creating with it. You're going to spin the baseball. That's not going to be a problem. Yeah. I want you to work on grip. I want you to work on arm angle. And I want you to change a couple of these things. And then we're going to figure out a better sequence to use those pitches. And then all of a sudden guys come out of it and it's like they're a brand new arm. And I think it's that combination of being able to know the analytics is a good line of delineation, but we're still going to teach baseball like baseball. And that's, I think a piece that's missing in a lot of places, but some places have figured that out. And it is cool to see that kind of that line of deviation between the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And I think, unfortunately, for those organizations, maybe, or if they do get a little bit off and if they're a little bit frustrated with their pitching prospects coming through, my guess is, and I was able to kind of work with the Phillies a little bit in 17 and 18 as well. Not just in spring training, but actually during the season as well. And they were just, this wave of analytics was kind of happening where everyone's looking at their iPad and everything else. And I was seeing this transition during those years. But what I was really kind of afraid of, and what I think ended up happening, by and large, and hopefully, and certainly not with every system, because as you just mentioned, the good ones don't do this. But there was this thought that if you're going to, go from, let's just say, a curveball to a slider, the first thing you're going to look at is the spins coming out of your hand. How fast is it spinning? But and so trying to create as much spin as possible, but you're never learning how to throw the pitch, and you're never learning like, okay, this is what it needs to feel like coming out of my hand. And now that I feel like I've kind of got a little bit of control in that rotation, now I can try and put more on it. Now I can try and get a little more torque. Now I can try and get the spin rate up because it's comfortable now and I know how to use it. I know how to pitch with it. Now I can make it a plus pitch by adding, more, by trying to get a little bit more and creating more rotation and spin.
Or change the pressure and get more movement.
Exactly. Instead of that being the primary goal, the initial objective, get as much movement, as much spin as possible. But guys never learn how to pitch with it. Yeah. And it just comes out like, okay, nasty. It's got this crazy spin rate, but you never really learn how to control it. And so you get these guys with massive, walk counts in the minor leagues. And they still might get looked at in the big leagues, but when they get there, it doesn't last long because they've never learned how to control it. They've never learned how to pitch with it and back off a little bit if they need to, just to get a strike. I mean, you see guys with nasty breaking balls out there and they bounce like 10 in a row and you're like, dude, make an adjustment. But they can't because in the minor leagues, guys will swing and miss at that all the time. And the major leagues hitters are like, you know what, just don't swing at it. And all of a sudden he can't get it into the zone because he never learned how to pitch with it. He just learned how to spin it as hard as he could.
Well, it's a placebo effect on a screen, right? Oh, yeah. 3,000 plus. Awesome. I'm a big league guy now. And that's the whole conversation that we see going on a regular basis. And it's not just with, breaking balls, right? From a standpoint of even changeups and the way people are pronating. There is so much going on where, again, the focus has just shifted so far one direction, and we're starting to see it as well. It's how do we bring it back to the middle? Because the way you talk about this, in my opinion, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is the analytics do have a great place. It's about, again, melding that together and knowing when and why to utilize them. They're a tool over the answer, and I think that's the biggest miss that I see at the current moment.
I agree. They are a tool to get you to a better place. And, it's funny because when we would do our scouting reports and I would be, sitting in the bullpen, but even before we actually started the game, whenever we'd face a new team, a new team would come in, we'd sit down before the series and we'd have our scouting reports we would do with our pitching coach and, everybody would be sitting in a room and we talk about the hitter's strengths and weaknesses and everything else. But the only thing I ever really wanted to know was is this guy going to ambush my fastball if I throw it on the first pitch? Is he just, dead red fastball? If so, I need to know that so I don't, pipe one and just try and get ahead. But but there are so many other things now that are being brought in that I think there's an information overload. And to your point, there's a reliance on that information where you see guys with really good stuff and a darn pretty good feel of how to pitch, and they get up there and they kind of abandon what they know works for them because there is so much information about this hitter. There is so much like, this guy, if your spin rate is over this on this fastball, this guy is not going to hit you. So instead of pitching to your strengths, these guys are trying to create something out there that they don't have or that's out of their element, and especially guys coming in from the bullpen. And I think that it becomes, it's a crippling effect because guys don't rely on themselves. They don't trust what they have. They got them there. They're relying now on these massive scout reports that really show the holes in the hitter's swing if you can do a certain thing. But what happens if you can't, if that's not who you are as a pitcher? So it should be used as a tool, but you're right. I mean, it's often used as like, this is what you have to do to have success. And it takes guys out of what they know how to do.
It's such a great example that you bring up too. And the one that I'll bring up right now is a kid who I think has outstanding stuff at the current moment in Jack Leiter. And the whole notion on him is when he throws 97 or higher, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. But if his fastball drops to 96 or lower, all of a sudden he's extremely hittable. You tell somebody that enough times, they believe it too. And it's this overall mix of understanding he didn't get to the big leagues just because he could throw over 97.
That's right.
He's had pedigree his entire life. We all know who his dad was. We got to watch him. He was fantastic. He's one of the better right-handed prospects in all of baseball. He has all the spin rate metrics you could possibly ask for. But if you consistently tell a guy that everybody's going to hit your fastball under 96 and you're putting him on a potential innings limit or pitch limit to where he's only going 4 to 5 innings, guess what he's going to do? Empty the tank. And a lot of times that could potentially, in a bad situation, shorten his career. It could affect health. One of the things I did want to ask you is conditioning too at the Major League Baseball level. When we talk about arm health and things, I think is a really big topic in our minds, where one of the reasons guys could throw so much longer, in my opinion, when you were playing and before you, was specifically because you trained your body to do that. There's a large difference now when you're asking a guy who might have great stuff to come up and be part of your team, and now you have him on this pitch limit. But the reality is if he's got that pitch limit in bullpens, if he's not lengthening himself out, once you do decide to ask this guy to go 6 instead of 5, you're putting him in a situation that his body may or may not be ready for. Do you see conditioning changing as well?
I do, and I see strength training as well to, again, complement max velocity, to complement max burst of 110% of what you do, and that again, guys are training that way all the way in high school now to be able to kind of maximize that, and people just what is the purpose of training for endurance if you feel like as a young player it's not the endurance that's going to get you to the major leagues. It's not throwing 7 innings at 90 miles an hour, but you're navigating your way through a lineup. It's throwing 5 innings where you're striking everybody out. You're going to train physically that way as well. And it is absolutely true that if you don't, there is something really subtle about pitching that's completely gone now. And it is, for me, I felt it when I was a starter through the minor leagues. And I absolutely loved, kind of getting deeper into the game where you're not at 100% anymore. But, you still feel good and you're kind of having fun pitching, so to speak, because it's not just blowing guys away. Now we're like, there's a strategy or there's a chess match here. I mean, I grew up watching Greg Maddux. Like, how can I get a guy looking silly on an off-speed pitch, at this late in the game? Like, there's a strategy. And I think that strategy now is pretty much out the window. It's just now like it's stuff. And I think that that's an unfortunate part of training as well, is that people are training for stuff. I mean, guys are doing the drive line, everything else, and trying to maximize that extra burst. And it takes away from, and maybe there's this old school, David Wells thought of you can't pull fat. I don't know. But it's guys are jacked now and they're big and they're strong and they're throwing 103 miles an hour. And it's great in short bursts, but if you're a big, strong dude and you would back down to 100 or 98, you could probably throw infinitely long and enjoy what you're doing and not feel like every pitch has to be this exhausting, burst of energy. I mean, you can just get out there and have fun with the craft of pitching, but you don't see a whole lot of people perceive it that way anymore. And, it's an old school thought. It's this balance that we're talking about. But I really wish for a lot of these starters that they could kind of find the joy in pitching at 90%. I wish for Leiter you could figure out how to pitch at 90% and have a great time doing it. While it might be true that he gets hit a little bit more if he goes below, that's not because, his stuff still isn't good enough to get guys out. It's because he hasn't learned to pitch down there.
Right.
And if he does learn to pitch down there, and if he's kind of enjoying the challenge of pitching down there, he could have an incredible, and I'm sure he still will, but have an incredible career, and really be happy with what he's doing and have a lot more, likelihood of not being injured as well.
I remember, and I've seen so many videos of it now, like Maddox later in his career and some of these other guys, like the first 3, 4, 5 innings of a game, they would come off the mound and it looked so low effort. Like it didn't look like they had done a lot. It didn't look like they had to think a lot. It didn't look like they had to work very hard. And now you look at guys come off the mound after every inning and it looks like they have just run sprints and they have just gone. And it's like, and our listeners know this, Ryan and I play men's league baseball together. And I never pitched in my entire career. And then Ryan said, you're the only 30-year-old with a fresh arm. I'm going to teach you how to pitch. And like my goal when I start games is like, how many innings can I go out to the mound and come back to the dugout and feel like I didn't have to do a whole lot? It was very low energy, very low effort. I mixed up enough that guys took really bad swings. They got themselves out. And that's the side of pitching. And one guy who does it really well right now is Paul Skeens. And I think there's two things. One, late bloomer, was never the guy who was used for 65 to 80 games in Little League to throw harder than everybody. But I also think catching at a high level and catching in college, he learned the game of pitching from the other side. So understanding how to think through and go after hitters, the fact that he throws as hard as he does, and he developed more pitches this offseason with the intent to work around his stuff. He's one of the few guys that you see waste pitches with purpose, not just wasting pitches to get swings. He's wasting pitches because they work off of other pitches that he's going to throw next with intent. You just don't see it nearly as much anymore because, face it, a lot of guys when they pitch 1 or 2 innings in a game don't have to. For 75% of their outings, which is more than enough to get a nice contract, they can go up there and just be a thrower and not a pitcher and get their contract. But Paul Skeens is a different animal in the way that he attacks hitters, and I think that's what's so fascinating is there are guys that are elite and doing it differently, and I'm hoping that people notice that and it starts to trend the other direction because it does feel like maybe we're moving back in the direction of pitchers pitching because of how many arm injuries we've had.
Yeah, I hope so.
Jacob deGrom purposely said he came into the season, I'm going to scale back my velocity with the intent to go deeper into the season, throw differently, mix my stuff. Now, Jacob deGrom's a different animal, right? He'll throw it on a dime whenever and wherever he wants with anything he has. But I think every one of these guys being at the top 1% of their profession have the capability to be that type of arm. They just have never been taught or never needed to.
Yeah, I think that, in the case with Skeens, I mean, it's funny because I think it was the beginning of this year, his strikeout rates were lower and people were like, what's – and you know what? Like, who cares? Like, I mean, really, who cares? Because if you're able to go out there for a full season and dominate the way he's done again this year, like people are going to look back and, whether you're striking out 10.5 per 9 innings or 9.5 or 8.5, like what – I think people sometimes forget, like, okay, well, his fantasy value maybe took a little bit of a hit, but you know what? Now he's like the most prized starting pitcher in baseball. So I think he's going to be okay if he's striking out, 8 dudes an inning per 9 innings instead of 10. And I think that, to your point, he's been able to kind of learn at a younger age that he doesn't have to throw every fastball at 100 miles an hour. He can. And Justin Verlander could, but he would also take off a lot. And I think he's one of the remaining guys in the game, obviously Kershaw and some pitchers like that, Scherzer, but Verlander for me was always a little bit of an anomaly because he would reserve so much of himself for later in the game, and you'd see the velocity, and especially like for the somewhere around year like 5 to 8, where he would kind of go from a mid 90s guy, 94, 95 to like an upper 90s guy in the 6th, 7th, and even 8th inning, when he needed to have more stuff because he knew he could navigate through a lineup at 94 miles an hour. Like, I know it's the major leagues, but it's clockwork, right? And so you like for him to know that about himself and to trust that, hey, I can get through a lineup a couple times, not having to be 100%. And then I have that in reserve. Now, I mean, he's kind of Gumby in terms of his body. Like he's, kind of a physical anomaly where he, I know he's had some injuries recently, but that's after he's thrown a lot of innings. And I just feel like he trained himself a little bit differently and he really took to heart. Somebody got a hold of him early in his career and did a great job telling him that you can pitch at 90% until you need to go more. I remember, one former teammate of mine, Roy Oswalt, he did that really well for a long time. Yeah. And, he doesn't get the love he deserves in terms of, what he did in his career, but he was a guy that could absolutely go plus late in the game and, go from 94 to 98 if he needed to.
So I think it's awesome that you just said that because I just pulled up Roy to make sure that I wasn't crazy that you guys played together for a few years. Yeah. Lance Berkman has one of the greatest stories ever about Roy Oswalt, and I want to know if you were in the know of this, where he apparently touched the starter of his car after having a ton of different issues in the offseason. It sent volts up his arm, and after that, he never had an arm injury past that and never had arm fatigue.
I can verify. It's what Roy told us coming into spring training. He's and honestly, like, I don't know if that's exactly how it happened or not, but that's what he said. And I will, Roy is from this tiny town of Weir, Mississippi, and the stories that come out of Roy Oswalt are just like nothing you've ever heard. You're like, did you live in 1850? Like this is impossible what you're describing right now. But he was something special, and really. For him, it's funny because like when he was coming through the minor leagues, he actually threw it. So I don't know if you guys remember, he threw his curveball way slower than his fastball. Like his curveball would be like a 68 mile an hour curveball, 65. He could sometimes throw it even less than that, but he would still kind of have that jump at you motion. But he had a great feel for pitching. And so he could really take on and, take off or put on when he needed to at will. But one of the thoughts when he was coming up was that there was such a big differentiation between his fastball and curveball. The hitters would have kind of this reload phase and they would hit his curveball because they'd be like, oh, there it is. And they would be able to wait back and then hit it well. Of course, that was not the way it played out. And he dominated guys from the second he got to the major leagues. But he was really somebody that I enjoyed watching pitching for a long time. And yeah, Roy and I were still are friends for a long time. We even got to play together in Philadelphia toward the end of his career, towards the end of both of our careers, which was a lot of fun as well. But, he was somebody that, there were a lot of stories that came out of Roy, but that, the thing about his arm and never hurting again, I think that is probably true. And it wouldn't surprise me with somebody like Roy.
It's incredible.
That is one of the, when we saw that at one point in time, it gave us a good chuckle. Well, listen, put in a good word for us. We'd be happy to get all the other stories out of him just for you. We got you.
Okay, good, yeah.
But definitely let us know. We do want to make sure we get some time. You mentioned it already. You had the opportunity recently to see your mentor and one of your great friends, Billy Wagner, get inducted into the Hall of Fame, something that Evan and I were extremely excited to see happen. For some of our younger viewers who maybe didn't get to see Billy Wagner on the hill the way that we had the opportunity to as well, and we were fortunate to have grown up in a time where he was pitching, can you tell them a little bit about the dominance of Billy Wagner? Because wow, was he outstanding.
Well, he really was. And one of the things that jumps out to me most, if you look at like Billy Wagner's career numbers against like certain Hall of Famers, I mean, guys didn't even really put the ball in play off this guy. It was domination on a level that really, was unheard of. So he kind of separated himself from everybody else in the game by at least several miles an hour, I think. I mean, there were guys like Kyle Farnsworth that could touch 100, but Wagner would get out there and, most every night he was touching 103. And this would be the equivalent of today of like pretty much sitting around 106 every single game, 107, I don't know, but like probably about 106 like every game. Like he was in another class of velocity than anybody else. And he also had this very short arm stroke. So one of the amazing things about Billy Wagner is he's actually right-handed, but he broke his arm twice playing football growing up, and so he learned how to throw left-handed. And so I don't know how it happened. It's one of the stories that he referred to in the Hall of Fame speech that he had, but he would just kind of, his left arm would go, his hand would just go straight behind his body. There was never like an arm circle or an arm arc. It would just go straight back and straight forward. And it like stayed below his head the whole time. So when he was throwing 103 with tremendous backspin and this crazy arm, circle, which wasn't even really a circle, hitters were starting their swings and they would end up, trying to groove a swing for a fastball that looked like a strike, and they would miss it by 2 feet. You don't see hitters miss fastballs by 2 feet in the game at all, ever. But this would happen like every night. So they just couldn't see it, and then it was by him. And, you watch him against some of the best ever, and it was really it was a mismatch. I mean, it was like literally like he looked like he was playing, throwing against Little League kids. And I'm talking about Hall of Famers. So the domination was real. And, funny, it would always be those guys like So Taguchi in St. Louis, or like the guys that you'd be like, this guy's going to get blown away. Those would be the guys that would end up getting little shank hits or whatever off Billy Wagner that like generated all the hits he ever gave up and all the runs. It wasn't the big dogs, because those guys, they were actually trying to like see the pitch and stay on it. If you tried to do that, you weren't going to touch it.
Can I tell you who hit really well against him?
Who's that?
I knew when I'm like looking at it right now, and I knew as soon as I typed his name in, the numbers were going to be good, because he told us this is what he did was Jack Wilson. Because Jack Wilson was like, I always got in the box, and I was this guy that everybody looked at. They're like, I'm just going to run a fastball right by him. He goes, so I was always geared up and ready. He goes, I wasn't putting it out of the yard, but I'd get a double here or there. I'd get a single. She's 4 for 11, hit a clean 364 off of him.
Impressive for sure. That's awesome. Well, that's, I'm sure, and Jack Wilson was a better hitter than he gets recognized for. But that being said, I'm sure that's a very, accurate thing when Billy Wagner's going out there and negotiating a lineup. Jack Wilson is not going to be the guy that he pitches around. He's going to go right at him.
Right.
And, some of those guys like Jack, they know how to put the ball in play. They know how to get the barrel to the ball, and even off of 103. So that's impressive.
And for those who don't know, too, where we take a measurement of velocity at the major league level has changed over time in a multitude of different ways. For example, when Aroldis Chapman threw 105.7 on the radar gun, that ball was actually measured just out of his hand at what we would consider now peak velocity. So when Brad mentions that it was today's equivalent of 106 on a radar gun, that's kind of what we're talking about in this scenario, because at that point in time, I believe it was at 50 feet that the velocity measurement was taken, if I remember correctly. So very interesting. The other thing, too, for those who are not as familiar with Billy Wagner, listed at 5'10", we're talking about a guy who is not this 6'6" behemoth who was throwing 103 miles an hour on a regular basis. Extremely, extremely impressive to what he did. I feel so fortunate that I got to watch him pitch, and I should have known the left-handed thing, but I didn't. That was
I did know that he was on Tim and Jeff Kirkshan's podcast, and I heard him tell the story like a month ago, and I was like, I can't believe that. That's insane. So I did.
It really is. I mean, it's such an anomaly. Like, he's such a rare human being to be able to do what he did, and to have that kind of, you'd be a Hall of Famer. And thank God, by the way, that he is, because I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times. If he didn't get elected to the Hall of Fame, that's it. No closer, no reliever will ever get elected again, because his numbers, it's not like guys are going to compile 500, 600 saves anymore. So if what Billy Wagner did isn't good enough, that's kind of what guys are going to be compared to now. And, I think, you look at a case for a Kenley Jansen, a Aroldis Chapman, and maybe even a Craig Kimbrell, but those guys would have no chance if Billy Wagner didn't get in.
Right. Yeah.
And Wagner, too, for those who aren't as familiar, he ended his career with a 2.31 ERA over 16 years. At the big league level.
I'm telling you right now, he could have played another 10 years if he wanted to. No one could see his arm angle anyway, and he was just as dominant as last year. It's one of the things I respect a ton about Wags is that, when he hung it up, he's like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go home and hang with the fam. And everyone's like, dude, like, you know what? You're like, that's the most dominant season we've ever seen. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of done though.
69.1 innings at the age of 38 in 2010 with Atlanta. He had a 1.43 ERA and 37 saves. That is unheard of at that age in the back end of bullpen.
It's totally not the same level. But it's funny, Ryan and I were having this conversation literally last night, where I said, like when my college season ended, like he's played men's league since college. This is my first year ever playing it, and I've been out of college for almost 10 years now. When I finished playing, I was just like, yeah, okay, I think I'm good. I'll do something else now. And like there was no like, oh, it's too bad I'm not good enough to keep playing, or
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like I was burnt out. It wasn't that my body hurt too much. I was just like, okay, I'll do the next thing now. Like that's okay. And I think there's some people where like they just don't get emotionally attached to anything they do. And so they just do it while they enjoy doing it. And then when there's another thing out there that they could perceivably go enjoy doing, it's like, yeah, I'll go do that now. That's okay.
Absolutely. And for Billy Wagner was to just go home and hang with his fam, to coach his sons in Little League. And it's great. I mean, I can tell you this, when I left the game, I knew I wanted to do something else, but also I think it was a lot easier because that last unremarkable year in Washington, I had a lot of injuries as well. I actually tore my lower ab muscle and sports hernia, as they call it now. And it just made it easy for me to stop because my body was like, you're throwing like 89 miles an hour right now. So you have no business, still being in the game. So that made things easier. But it is interesting because, yeah, I mean, it's like, if you aren't, trying for, and I don't think the Hall of Fame was ever something Billy Wagner was really trying for. Like if he didn't have that, then, he was done when he was done. And that was just remarkable because I'll tell you this much, if he had played another couple of years, he would have been maybe not a first ballot guy, but more like a Trevor Hoffman second ballot type of thing.
Right. Now, I again, we don't want to take an insane amount of your time, but I do want to flip it back to you because we had one other question for you that we've been very curious about. You got traded during the winter meetings. What was that experience like for you? Was it something you kind of had an idea was coming, or was it a surprising thing that happened? And then when it happened, was there a whole rush of baseball focus, or was it family focus and like, what are we going to do as a family now at that point in your career?
Yeah. So I remember it very well. It was, I was driving home from Denver. My wife and I had a dinner somewhere. We were driving back toward South Denver. And I get this phone call all of a sudden from Ruben Amaro in Philadelphia. And he's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that we're super excited. We've made a trade for you, and you're going to be a Philadelphia Philly. And I was just like, what? And I mean, here's the thing, like, you never think you're going to get traded, and then all of a sudden one day it happens. I've been with the Houston Astros since I got drafted in 98, and this is the offseason of 2007. So in my mind, I'm going to be an Astro indefinitely.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something like this happens. Now, I should have, in retrospect, had a little bit better idea because we had a new GM come in, Ed Wade, who had kind of mentioned to people that he was going to make changes. And, frankly, the Astros had this great run for a while. And then 2 years in a row, we were not in the postseason. It was like, uh-oh, when that type of thing happens, it's time for some changes. So it made sense that I got traded. But still, in my mind, I was like, Philadelphia, huh? Like, that's a pretty rough place. Because, like, as a visiting player, when you go in there, I mean, it is, it's just, you should probably wear earmuffs if you're not, attuned to cursing.
It's not named the same brotherly love for nothing.
That's right. But, even I think at that point I was like, well, this will probably be good for me. And I was excited, but definitely, like, one of the first things you're thinking about is like, okay, our daughter is 3. We're hopefully going to have a son soon, or another kid soon. It ended up being a son. And we've got to figure out how to get to, spring training's in Clearwater. Okay, that's not too bad. Like, that's a good place. But then in Philadelphia, like, where are we going to live? Are we going to be, I've heard certain people live in the city, certain people live in South Jersey. So, like, there's all this organization that I think as a, for me, like, okay, I got to make sure my wife is settled and she's like, that's taken care of. So I don't have to worry about that when I'm playing. And fortunately, the Phillies organization is like fantastic at that stuff. And they kind of know, like, it can be a little bit of a rough transition for anybody to get traded, but coming into a city like Philly, if you're not familiar with it, so they, were able to get me some, some realtors and everything else and kind of figure out what ended up working. And it ended up being a much more comfortable situation than I thought. And fortunately, the season got off to a great start and it just kept going. So it just felt like, man, this is amazing. I'm so glad I got traded. I will tell you that one feeling I had, like when I was out on the mound, you always talk about like feels, and we were kind of thinking that old school thing. For me, pitching outside again, as opposed to kind of pitching in that dome in Minute Maid Park, brought back like a lot of like feelings of baseball, like different like smells. Cause like, I mean, even stuff like that, like there's something about pitching outside and having like the roof open for me that just feels a lot more like baseball. And so it just kind of felt like I was in a little bit different environment instead of being in, it's fun to pitch in Houston, of course, but like when I got to Philly, I was like, this just has a different feeling, and it felt better for me to kind of be in that environment, I think.
Was that the year that Jimmy Rollins, before the year started, made the comment that, you guys had the target, or you guys were the team to beat coming into the year? Or was that the year before when he won the MVP?
I think it was the year before, if I'm not mistaken, because, that year before in 2007, he won the MVP, and the Mets were, leading the division all the way into like the second to last week of the season, and then they just went the other way, and then the Phillies went one way. And the Met rivalry when I got to Philly was real. It was intense for sure.
Well, I was going to ask, like, did it come with a little bit of added pressure? Like you're the guy. You come in knowing like, okay, they just traded for me as the closer. And did it come with like extra pressures that you like almost hadn't felt since you had first stepped into that role in Houston?
I think yes and no. I mean, there was kind of an interesting thing where I felt like I was getting to a team that had like so many young superstars that like I was there and there was expectations, but there was like all these expectations on the other guys, and like really big expectations. Right. So I felt like it wasn't maybe quite as much, but then on the other hand, it was like you also knew like, they had said like, you're the last piece of the puzzle. We want you to do this because we think we're going to be a World Series winning team. So there is like a level of expectation there for sure. And, when you're in a city like Philly, you kind of know, like I more than a couple people let me know early on, like, Philly fans, like true Philly fans that are like, hey, you better not blow it or, whatever. And that's all good. Like I was at a good place when I left Houston, I think. And so I was kind of ready for that pressure and ready to kind of be in that environment. And it almost felt like a do or die type of scenario. Because, you go to Philly and you don't do well as a closer, it could be pretty bad for a lot of reasons. But for me, it was, like I said, I was very fortunate, got off to a good start. I felt really healthy that year too. Like 2008, I came in there and I was like, man, I just came off of having a knee surgery and, some other stuff going wrong in 2007 in Houston. And I finally felt like super healthy again. So I had a feeling it was going to go well, but obviously I couldn't have predicted what happened.
That's awesome. So 45-year-old Jamie Moyer starting 33 games that year.
Yeah.
The Jamie Moyer changeup.
What a
great commercials, by the way, in case anybody forgot about those. Great commercials.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Brad, thank you so much. You've given us a ton of time. We love to end our interviews with a little bit of a trivia question about your career for everybody we've interviewed so far. So you've given us the kind of intro into 2008 really well here. So in 2008, very obviously, you were perfect in save opportunities. And that is something that is not relatively heard of for anybody who was curious. It's happened with 6 other closers other than you. Can you name any of those closers who had perfect seasons when it came to closing games?
Well, I know that Eric Gagne had it felt like he had a season, or maybe it didn't happen in one season, but I know he had like this massive stretch of 55 straight at one point. So I would assume that was like one season, or maybe it was like bits of 2 different seasons. I'm not sure.
So that was between 2 seasons. So he was not perfect in a full season.
Okay.
So
that's too bad because I was.
You were close. No. I mean, listen. Go, Flax. Go ahead with the other 6.
Yeah. So it was John Wetland, Troy Percival, Koji Uehara.
I do remember Percival doing that. Yes.
Yeah. Zach Britton. Zach Britton was on the list. Greg Holland.
Yep.
And Rob Nen. So.
Oh yeah, I remember Rob Nen too, and I should have remembered Britton and Holland. Those are some dominant dudes right there. That was that's cool.
It was easy for me when Ryan asked me this question. I was like, well, I know one of them because I know one of them, Zach Britton, because I watched the entire season as an Orioles fan.
Was that the year that he didn't get put in the postseason and Ubaldo Jimenez did instead?
Yes.
All right. Not to haunt any Baltimore fans out there, but it is
You're haunting the one that's here. No.
I actually don't. There's parts of me that don't disagree with Buck. If you watched Ubaldo that season, he was a ground ball machine. But Edwin Encarnacion was also a home run machine. So, he won that battle. It is what it is. I'm not salty about it anymore.
Good.
Brad, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to speak with you. It was great to learn a little bit about your passion for archaeology, a lot about your baseball career, and thank you for sharing this with, the base of people who come to, listen to us here on Baseball Unstitched. You closed out a lot of great games. I got to watch it a lot while you were in Philly and really gained an appreciation for not only your stuff, but the way you pitched and carried yourself. So thank you so much for being such a great ambassador to the game.
Hey, listen, I appreciate that for sure. And I will say you guys did an awesome job. Seriously, great questions. And it was a lot of fun to talk about, some of the memories and also what's going on today in the game. So nice job on your end as well. And I appreciate, not every time you do these interviews or they go as smoothly. So I appreciate you guys being, well studied in the game as you are.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
All right. Hope you enjoyed it. We had a ton of fun. Brad, thank you so much for taking some time with us. We were extremely appreciative. Always welcome back on the podcast, as we always hope for all of our guests. Flax, at the end of the day, we had the opportunity to talk to somebody who absolutely dominated throughout our childhood. One of the main closers I remember growing up watching, and every time he stepped on the field, I kind of knew my team was probably screwed.
Can I say this? It was really enjoyable talking with him about how things have shifted and the mentality he used to have in the bullpen and the situations he used to be in being in the bullpen, but also how that torch was passed to him. And then how he kind of tried to pass that torch to some other players. I think that sometimes gets lost in the player-to-player interaction and the situations that these guys are in. I think a lot of times it's just assumed, these guys are on a plan. It's very structured. I think sometimes it's, we've gotten to a point where we give players the opportunity to speak up, and that's not a bad thing. And I think he even recognized that that's not a bad thing. It is good. Guys are lasting longer in some respects because they have that. So it was really cool to get a lot of different perspectives from him, and great guest, really enjoyable. And I will say this about you: that was a phenomenal transition on the front end of this, of the interview in the in the podcast, getting me off my soapbox into the interview. So I appreciate that.
It's about the only thing I'm not paid for. Wait, what? Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Anything here? I don't know what you're talking about.
Neither of us. Hope you guys enjoyed it once again. Flax, closing thoughts. Who's going first, me or you today?
You, brother.
I'm cool with that. So my closing thoughts do have to do with the interview. I'm really hoping, as we set out on this journey, one of the biggest things that we were here to do is talk about bridging the gap between how we speak about analytics and how we speak about the player side of baseball and, visually what you see on a regular basis. I felt like hopefully our audience getting to hear how Brad spoke about those differences, not only the changes, but how sometimes we can lean too far one way or the other, really resonates. I recognize that I am not a two-time All-Star and World Series champion. That's never going to change. However, we do want to make sure that you guys get to hear it and see these types of things from people who have been there, done that, and have every right to always talk about baseball at that level. So I hope you enjoyed that. And for me, it's really important that you guys get to hear that too.
Yeah, I think my only other closing thought would be stop DMing Major League Baseball players. Stop telling Major League Baseball players how much you think they stink. Because A, they don't care what you think. You don't mean anything to them. And B, have a little bit of self-respect. Speaking to anybody, you would never look these guys in the eye and say it to their face. So either get out from behind your computer and actually put it to words and say it to their face and see what the result looks like, or just keep it to yourself. It's unnecessary. Because at the same time we saw the Taylor Saucedo thing last week, happened again to Cade Povich 2 days later. And I really applaud these players for being outwardly spoken about these things happening and not just holding on to it. Because the only way it's going to be stopped is if people know that it's actually existing and happening. So that's all I got.
Nope, I think that's a good soapbox to be on, and I'll second it. Nobody comes to your job every day because you did something and tell you how terrible you are, and then have comments that are related to their family and loved ones. Let's just be kind to each other. I know that's been lost. So I think that's where we end this today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, a pleasure to have Brad Lidge on the podcast. We hope to bring some more interesting and wonderful guests into the fold for you guys. But for now, enjoy this week in baseball.